Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slightly unusual trip back in time. You know, those epic samurai battles you see in movies. Swords clanging, arrows flying, one on a line? Yeah, picture that. But now, sprinkle in a few guys with what looks suspiciously like a fancy paper umbrella. Sounds ridiculous, right? Like, you'd probably trip over your own feet and get skewered on day one if you tried that. Fighting in the rain isn't just unpleasant, it's genuinely debilitating. Your movements become sluggish in the mud, your grip on your weapon less secure, and your visibility drops significantly. Arrows, when fired, lose some of their deadly accuracy as they cut through the wet air. Gunpowder, if anyone was using early firearms, becomes unreliable or downright useless. It's a messy, frustrating affair. You might be thinking, well, why didn't they just wear raincoats? Now, you've seen the Roman patrician and the common plebeian, the bustling markets and the public baths. But what about the backbone of the empire, the formidable Roman legionaries? These soldiers, renowned for their discipline, engineering prowess, and sheer fighting spirit, were constantly on the move, establishing Roman rule across vast territories. You might wonder, how did they handle oral hygiene on the march, far from the amenities of Roman cities? Did our peculiar mouthwater make it into their standard etiquette? Imagine yourself as a Roman legionary, trudging through the mud of Germania, or sweating under the desert sun in Egypt. Your pack is heavy, filled with armor, weapons, rations, and basic camping gear. Every ounce counts. So, would you really be carrying a heavy amphora of fermented urine for your morning swish? Probably not in large quantities. But the principle, perhaps, remained. While there isn't extensive historical documentation detailing the precise dental routines of individual Roman soldiers on campaign, we can infer quite a bit from their pragmatic approach to life. Roman military camps, or castra, were engineering marvels. They were meticulously planned, often including sanitation facilities, though these would be far more rudimentary than urban baths. They understood the importance of hygiene for preventing disease in crowded conditions, as a sick army was a vulnerable army. It's unlikely that every soldier carried a personal supply of specialized urine. However, the basic ingredients for producing it, namely human waste and time, were always available. A unit might have designated areas for collection, or perhaps a pragmatic centurion would see the value in setting aside a communal vat for this purpose. After all, if it helped keep the men healthy and their teeth in fighting shape, it would be a small logistical challenge for a military known for its organizational genius. A soldier with a toothache is a soldier who can fight effectively. Moreover, Roman soldiers were known for their resourcefulness. Away from the urban centers, they would have relied on whatever local resources were at hand. Chewing on sticks, rubbing teeth with abrasive sand or ash from their campfires, and rinsing with whatever liquid was available would have been common. If they understood the cleansing properties of aged urine, it's not hard to imagine them improvising its production in the field. It would be a testament to their adaptability, making do with what they had, even if it meant a less refined, perhaps even more potent, version of our Roman mouthwash. Historians are still debating the exact degree to which specific civilian hygiene practices, like the regular use of urine mouthwash, translated directly to military life on campaign. While the Roman military was highly organized, the realities of constant movement and austere living conditions would have necessitated simpler, more portable solutions. However, the core idea that ammonia-rich substances could clean teeth would have been a piece of practical knowledge that could be applied even in the harshest environments. So, while you might not have seen a legionary proudly displaying his personal urine flask on parade, rest assured that the Roman soldier, ever practical, would have found a way to maintain some semblance of oral hygiene, even if it was just a quick swish with whatever dental solution could be produced in the wilds of the empire. Their focus was on keeping the fighting machine healthy and functional, and every little bit of practical hygiene, no matter how unappealing, contributed to that goal. You've braved the Roman morning routine, navigated the peculiar markets, and even enjoyed the century onslaught of their unique mouthwash. We've talked about the what and the why of Roman urine mouthwash, but let's delve deeper into the sheer sensory experience of it, specifically the smell. For us, the very idea is a potent olfactory assault. But how did the Romans cope? And what does it tell us about their relationship with others? Imagine pouring a small measure into your mouth, and that's a perfectly logical modern thought. But back then, the concept of a dedicated, lightweight, waterproof outer garment for soldiers simply didn't exist in the way we understand it. They had straw cloaks, sure, like the minnow, which offered some protection. But imagine swinging a sword or trying to maneuver quickly while wearing a glorified haystack. Not ideal. The emphasis was on armor for protection and movement, not on staying dry. The initial wave of scent hits you before the liquid even touches your tongue. It's sharp, acrid, unmistakably ammonia. For a modern person, this would trigger an immediate gag reflex, a desperate need for fresh air. But for a Roman, this was a familiar, perhaps even comforting, aroma. It signified cleanliness, efficacy, and routine. Their noses, you see, were probably far more accustomed to a wider spectrum of smells than ours. Think about the environment they lived in. Rome was a city of millions, bustling, vibrant, and incredibly aromatic. The smells of cooking fires, overflowing sewers despite their impressive aqueducts, urban waste management was still a challenge. Unwashed bodies, animals, tanneries, and various industries all mingled in the air. Public spaces were not sanitized with air fresheners. Bodily functions were more openly acknowledged. In such a world, a strong, pungent smell wasn't necessarily a sign of disgust. It was often just part of the background noise of life. This acclimatization to a strong outer profile meant that their perception of what constituted bad or unpleasant was likely different. What we consider overwhelming, they might have registered as merely present. The ammonia smell of their mouthwash, while potent, might have simply registered as a sign of its active ingredients, much like the strong smell of bleach registers to us as a sign of its cleaning power, without necessarily making us gag. It was a utilitarian smell, tied to a perceived benefit. There's also a psychological element at play. If you grow up with a certain practice, if you're told by your parents and your doctors that it's beneficial, you internalize its normalcy. The smell, however intense, becomes associated with a positive outcome: cleaner teeth, better health. It's similar to how some people develop an appreciation for the strong, unique smells of certain foods or traditional medicines that might initially be off-putting to outsiders. Historians still debate the extent of sensory desensitization in ancient populations, but it's clear their daily olfactory landscape was far richer and more challenging than our own. Moreover, the Romans were master perfumers and enjoyed strong, often complex scents. They used rich incense, fragrant oils, and floral perfumes. Perhaps these strong aromatic experiences also trained their noses to be more tolerant of, or even less reactive to, other powerful smells, even those that we would deem unpleasant. It's a fascinating thought. Did their love for strong perfumes inadvertently prepare them for the robust bouquet of their morning mouthwash? So, as you perform your daily rinse, you wouldn't be holding your breath or fighting down nausea. Instead, you'd likely be focused on the feeling of cleanliness, the slight tingle on your gums, and the hope for a brighter smile. The powerful aroma would simply be a part of the process, a sign that the dental disaster was, in fact, working its peculiar magic. It's a profound reminder that our sensory experiences, especially our sense of smell, are incredibly shaped by our cultural context and historical environment. You've braved the Roman morning routine, navigated the peculiar markets, and even endured the century onslaught of their unique mouthwash. But like all things, even the most deeply ingrained habits eventually fade. As the mighty Roman Empire began its long, slow decline, stretching over centuries, so too did many of its distinct practices and technologies. Our beloved, or perhaps reviled urine mouthwash, was no exception. It eventually slipped away into the dusty annals of history, replaced by other, less pungent, forms of hygiene. The reasons for its decline are multifaceted. As the Roman Empire fragmented and its vast networks of trade and governance weakened, the organized collection and distribution of this commodity likely became more challenging. The centralized system that supported the phalanx and public latrine collections would have faltered, making it harder for people to readily acquire large quantities of aged urine. Necessity, which once drove its adoption, would now drive its abandonment. Moreover, cultural shifts played a significant role. This fundamental design flaw in traditional samurai gear, coupled with Japan's notoriously damp weather, made for some truly uncomfortable and challenging campaign conditions. It's a small, mundane detail, but it profoundly impacted the everyday lives and deaths of these warriors. Historians often debate the true extent to which weather conditions dictated battle outcomes, but it's undeniable that a soaking wet army is a less effective army. With the rise of Christianity, which gradually became the dominant religion across the former Roman lands, there was a growing emphasis on spiritual purity and modesty. While the use of urine for practical purposes might not have been explicitly forbidden, the increasingly refined sensibilities of a new era might have slowly rendered such a public and intimate practice less acceptable, or at least less fashionable. As societies evolved, so too did their notions of what constituted proper hygiene and personal decorum. What was once pragmatic might now be viewed as crude or unsanitary. Then there's the loss of knowledge. As the Roman world transitioned into the early Middle Ages, much of the scientific and medical understanding of classical antiquity was lost or fragmented. The detailed works of writers like Pliny the Elder, which documented these practices, might have become less accessible or less understood. Without the underlying, albeit primitive, scientific justification for why it worked, the practice might have simply faded into obscurity, dismissed as an old, strange custom. Historians are still debating the exact timeline and specific reasons for the discontinuation of this practice across different regions of the former Roman Empire. Was it a rapid disappearance or a gradual fade-in? Did some isolated communities cling to it longer than others? The evidence is often sparse, leaving room for much fascinating speculation. New materials and methods also began to emerge, or older ones gained renewed prominence. Simpler abrasives, like crushed charcoal or more readily available plant materials, might have become the preferred methods for truth cleaning. The economic landscape changed, and the unique supply chain for urine diminished. People simply moved on to other things, forgetting the strange dental habits of their ancestors. So, you witnessed the slow twilight of an era. The grand public baths fall into disrepair, the bustling markets are less vibrant, and the dedicated urine collection points become relics of a bygone age. The distinct, sharp aroma that once permeated Roman life slowly dissipates, replaced by the smells of a new, different world. It's a testament to how profoundly connected our daily habits are to the larger forces of history, politics, economics, religion, and the inexorable march of time. The dental disaster, once a common sight, quietly retreats from the stage of history, leaving us to marvel at its strange and fleeting existence. So, we've journeyed through the pungent past, witnessing the Romans' surprisingly pragmatic approach to oral hygiene. You've swished, you've smelled, and you've hopefully gained a new appreciation for modern dental care. Now, let's bring it all back to the present, reflecting on this ancient dental disaster through the lens of modern science and what it tells us about progress, ingenuity, and the ever-evolving nature of human cleanliness. From our 21st century perspective, the idea of using aged urine as a mouthwash is, to put it mildly, deeply unappealing. We have gleaming white porcelain sinks, fluoride toothpaste in a rainbow of flavors, antiseptic mouthwashes, and regular trips to the dentist. We understand bacterial decay, the science of enamel, and the role of sugar in cavities. We know why our methods work, down to the molecular level. But here's the interesting part. The Romans, without any of this advanced knowledge, were onto something. They observed that aged urine made teeth whiter and perhaps even helped with bad breath. And they were correct, in a primitive way. The ammonia, created through the breakdown of urea, is a bleaching agent. It does have some disinfectant properties. It was a crude, uncomfortable, but fundamentally effective solution based on empirical observation. They didn't know about pH levels or bacterial colonies, but they saw a result, and they stuck with it. This highlights a fundamental truth about human ingenuity. Often, solutions are found long before the underlying science is fully understood. The Roman practice served as a vivid reminder of how far we've come in terms of public health, chemistry, and personal hygiene. Imagine a world where a trip to the dentist meant agonizing extractions or, worse, nothing at all. So, here you are, shivering slightly, water dripping from your nose, and that veteran's umbrella suddenly doesn't seem quite so ridiculous. In fact, you are in with a new, grudging respect. A small, portable canopy that could keep at least your head and shoulders dry, perhaps even your face clear of driving rain, might just be a game changer. It's not about grand strategy or heroic charges now. It's about basic human comfort and the ability to see your opponent clearly. The discomfort of a urine rinse pales in comparison to the agony of a raging truth infection. Their methods, however strange, were attempts to mitigate real suffering and maintain health in a challenging environment. It also makes us reflect on our own modern practices. What seemingly normal things do we do today that future generations will look back on with utter bewilderment, perhaps even disgust? Will they marvel at our reliance on plastics, our endless commutes, or our peculiar social media habits? History is a constant mirror, showing us not just where we've been, but also inviting us to question our present. Historians are still debating whether the psychological impact of such practices, beyond the physical effects, contributed to the Roman identity or resilience in ways we can't fully grasp. Was there a certain pride in enduring the unpleasant for the sake of health? This story isn't about judging the Romans, it's about understanding them. It's about appreciating their resourcefulness, their practicality, and their unwavering determination to solve problems with the tools at hand, even if those tools were a bit unorthodox. The dental disaster, once a common sight, quietly retreats from the stage of history, leaving us to marvel at its strange and fleeting existence. So, as you tuck yourself in, perhaps with the faint, comforting horror of a fan, remember the Romans. Remember their strange solutions, their resilient spirit, and their surprisingly clean if not minty fresh teeth. Let the quiet hum of your room become the distant murmur of ancient Rome, a city filled with peculiar smells and resourceful people. The world slows down, and the faint echoes of history blend with the soft sounds of the night. Your thoughts drift, pulled gently by the currents of time. You're floating now, between the ancient world and the present, a quiet observer of all that has been and all that will be. The dental disaster of the past fades, becoming a gentle whisper in the darkness, a lullaby from a bygone era. You are safe, you are warm, and the soft blanket of sleep begins to settle over you, light as a Roman toga, embracing you completely. Let go, and simply drift. This seemingly minor detail highlights a fundamental truth about history. Sometimes, the most innovative solutions come from the simplest, most universal problems, like wanting to stay dry on a very, very bad day. And trust me, for a samurai gearing up for battle in a downpour, any small advantage, even a dry face, could mean the difference between seeing another sunrise and becoming just another name whispered on the wind. As the rain intensified, you find yourself glancing at the veteran again, his face now surprisingly dry beneath the wide brim of his Japanese umbrella, or vagasa. It's not like the flimsy nylon things we use today, mind you. This is a work of art, a testament to centuries of craftsmanship. Imagine it, a framework of slender bamboo ribs, meticulously arranged, fanning out like a delicate skeleton. Over this, layers of sturdy washi paper are stretched and glued, often by hand. But here's the crucial bit, that paper isn't just paper. It's been treated, lavishly, with persimmon juice and linseed oil. This isn't just for decoration. This is the ancient secret to waterproofing. The persimmon juice, or kokoshibu, acts as a natural sealant, making the paper incredibly strong and resistant to water. Then, the linseed oil provides an extra layer of protection, giving the vagasa its distinctive translucent sheen and that slightly earthy, comforting smell when wet. This combination transforms what would otherwise be a soggy paper mass into a surprisingly durable shield against the elements. It's light, too, much lighter than you'd expect, thanks to the bamboo construction. And it folds up relatively compactly, though not as tiny as a modern telescoping umbrella, making it somewhat portable. You can just picture a skilled craftsman, patiently applying layer after layer, knowing that his finished product may one day protect a warrior, not just from a sudden shower on a stroll, but from the relentless downpour of a battlefield. It's a testament to the ingenuity of the time, solving a practical problem with the materials at hand. This wasn't some quick hack. The art of vagasa making was refined over centuries, passed down through generations of artisans. Each umbrella was a product of precise measurements, careful folding, and meticulous wheeling. It wasn't cheap either, so the veteran wielding one wasn't just using a casual accessory. He was potentially carrying a valuable, handmade piece of engineering that offered a distinct, if subtle, advantage. The very thought of taking such a delicate, yet essential, item into the chaos of battle might seem counterintuitive to us. Wouldn't it get torn or broken? Wouldn't it be an impediment? But here we are, diving into the curious question: when Japanese samurais carried umbrellas to battle. It's one of those bits of history that makes you scratch your head and wonder, did that really happen? And if so, why, how, and did it actually help? Or were they just trying to look stylish while dodging a katana? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, no pressure. These are the kinds of questions that make historians scratch their heads, trying to reconcile the romanticized image of the samurai with these very practical, almost mundane, considerations of daily life and survival in a pre-industrial world. But then again, maybe the unexpectedness of it was part of its charm, a small luxury in a harsh reality. It wasn't about flashy armor all the time. Sometimes, it was about a dry head. The drums are louder now, a steady, insistent beat that vibrates in your chest. The rain continues its relentless patter, turning the ground underfoot into a slick, treacherous morass. You can feel the weight of your waterlogged armor, the chill seeping into your bones. But then, you see it. The veteran, still remarkably dry beneath his fagasa, takes a few deliberate steps forward. He's not holding it like a parasol on a leisurely stroll through a garden. This is different. He holds it somewhat low, angled to deflect the worst of the rain from his face, allowing him a clearer view of the sodden field ahead. It's a strange, almost surreal sight. A warrior, fully armored, ready for the brutal dance of battle, yet partially obscured by a delicate, wallpaper canopy. You can't help but imagine the first time someone tried this. Was it a moment of desperate ingenuity, or a long-held secret tactic passed down through a specific family line? Imagine the initial reactions of his comrades, perhaps a snicker, a raised eyebrow. Is old Tanaka going soft in his old age, bringing his tea ceremony accessory to the battlefield? But then, as the rain truly sets in, and everyone else is squinting through watery eyes, wiping their faces with wet gauntlets, Tanaka quietly, calmly, surveys the opposition with an almost dry face. Suddenly, that snicker might turn into a grudging nod of respect. It's the kind of pragmatic solution that might seem absurd at first glance, but in the thick of it, when every small advantage counts, it could make a real difference. Beyond just staying dry, consider the psychological aspect. The samurai, composed and unbothered by the elements, might project an air of almost unsettling calm to an opponent struggling in the downpour. It's a subtle form of psychological warfare, isn't it? Look at me, show unconcerned by your pathetic rain. I brought my fancy umbrella. Of course, it's not an offensive weapon, and it certainly won't stop an arrow or a sword thrust. Its utility is far more nuanced. It's about maintaining vision, protecting the edge of your sword from excessive rust during a prolonged skirmish, or simply preserving your morale when everything else is conspiring to make you miserable. Historians have often overlooked these seemingly minor logistical and comfort details, focusing instead on grand strategies and heroic feats. But for the individual soldier, these mundane considerations were paramount. And let's be honest, there's a certain low-key humor to it, isn't there? The image is so contradictory. The stoic, fierce samurai, epitome of martial prowess, yet relying on something so gentle and domestic. It's like imagining a modern special forces operative pulling out a tea cozy in the middle of a raid. It's not what you expect. This visual incongruity is precisely what makes the topic so fascinating, pulling back the curtain on the unexpected realities of history that often get smoothed over in the dramatic retellings. It reminds us that even in the most intense situations, people are still, well, people, seeking small comforts and practical solutions to very inconvenient problems, even if it means bringing an umbrella to a sword fight. So, you're standing there, half shielded by your imaginary Vagasa, wondering what other tricks this humble item might have up its sleeve on the battlefield. Beyond merely keeping you dry, the Vergasa could have offered some surprisingly clever, if niche, tactical advantages. Imagine a skirmish in dense fog or swirling dust, common occurrences in certain terrains or after prolonged movements. The sudden unfurling of a dark-colored umbrella could provide a brief, fleeting moment of visual obstruction, momentarily startling or disorienting an opponent. It's not exactly a smoke grenade, but in the chaos of close quarters combat, even a split second of confusion could be enough to gain an advantage, or perhaps, to make a hasty retreat. Then there's the issue of sun glare, just a gentle nudge for those who appreciate a good, long, slightly bizarre historical rabbit hole before bed. And while you're at it, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. While we're currently in a rainy scenario, battles weren't exclusively fought under grey skies. Imagine a blazing summer day, with the sun reflecting off polished armor and wet surfaces, blinding you just when you need to see clearly. The Vergasa, even a slightly translucent one, could offer crucial shade, protecting your eyes and maintaining your focus. It's the kind of practical consideration that isn't taught in military academies, but is learned through painful experience on the ground. Think about archers, for instance, trying to aim with the sun directly in their eyes. A strategically placed umbrella, held by an assistant or even wedged into the ground, could provide just enough shade to improve their accuracy. It's a minor detail, but in an age where precision weaponry was rudimentary, every little bit helped. And what about identification or signaling? While not its primary purpose, a distinctive Vergasa design or color could potentially serve as a rudimentary signal, especially for higher-ranking officers trying to communicate across a noisy, chaotic field. Imagine a specific pattern on the umbrella signifying a command to advance or retreat, seen from a distance by your own troops. Historians have long speculated about the various improvised signaling methods used on ancient battlefields, from flag waving to horn blowing, and a Vergasa could easily fit into that category of whatever works. It's certainly less conspicuous than a giant banner, which might be a plus for subtle communication. Of course, these are all speculative uses. The umbrella isn't going to win the battle on its own. It's not a shield against swords or arrows, and it certainly won't deflect a charging cavalryman. But it highlights the human tendency to adapt and innovate, using whatever tools are available to gain even the smallest edge. It's about more than just personal comfort. It's about tactical ingenuity, however humble. This willingness to improvise, to find novel uses for everyday objects in extraordinary circumstances, is a hallmark of human resourcefulness throughout history. It reminds us that even the most seemingly mundane items can play a surprising role when necessity, or just a very bad rainy day, calls. Now, let's pivot a little from the practical to the philosophical, or at least the social. You're a samurai. Your entire life, your very identity, is steeped in a rigid code of conduct, a profound emphasis on honor, bravery, and the mastery of the sword. You live and breathe Bushido. So, imagine the internal conflict. On one hand, the very real, practical benefit of staying dry and seeing clearly in a downpour. On the other, the unspoken expectation, the sheer optics, of carrying something as seemingly civilian, as unwarlike, as an umbrella onto a battlefield. It's like showing up to a formal gala in a tuxedo, but with Crocs on your feet. Sure, the Crocs might be comfortable, but are they appropriate? For a samurai, whose very existence was about projecting an image of fierce dedication and unwavering resolve, carrying a Vergasa might have felt like a subtle breach of decorum. Would it make you look less formidable, less serious about the grim business of war? Historians have extensively documented the intense focus on appearance and symbolism within the samurai class. Everything, from the meticulously arranged top-notch to the family crest on the armor, conveyed meaning. The warrior was expected to maintain dignity even in the face of death. Think about the psychological impact on your fellow warriors. Would they see you as weak, as someone who couldn't enjoy the elements like a true samurai? Or would they envy your dry face? This is where the cultural nuances become incredibly complex and frankly, a bit funny. While practicality might dictate one thing, social norms and the powerful force of saving face could demand another. It's entirely possible that carrying an umbrella into battle was simply not done by most, not because it wasn't useful, but because it didn't fit the idealized image of a samurai. It suggests a tension between the grimy, uncomfortable reality of war and the lofty, often romanticized ideals of the warrior class. This isn't just about personal vanity, it's about maintaining group cohesion and respect. Imagine yourself, for a moment, not scrolling through your phone, but standing on a muddy, rain-slick battlefield in feudal Japan. The air is thick with anticipation, the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke hangs heavy. You're clad in lacquered armor, surprisingly heavy and clunky, not quite as graceful as the movies make it look. Around you, fellow warriors adjust their helmets, their breath misting in the cool air. If one warrior starts looking too comfortable, too soft, it could potentially undermine morale or even discipline. Of course, the high-ranking general might get away with it more easily than a foot soldier. A powerful daimyo might carry a fagasa as a symbol of his status, indicating that he could have such an item brought to him, while a lesser samurai might fear being ridiculed. It's a delicate balance between pragmatism and pride, a constant negotiation in the samurai mind, and perhaps, for every samurai who dared to unfurl a fagasa in battle, there were 10 more who simply gritted their teeth, got drenched, and muttered under their breath about the indignities of war. This clash between practicality and perceived prestige extends beyond the battlefield and into the very fabric of Japanese culture. The fagasa, this beautifully crafted umbrella, was, at its core, an item of daily life. It was used by everyone, merchants sheltering from the sun in bustling marketplaces, ladies strolling through temple gardens, farmers seeking respite from a sudden shower. It was a symbol of peace, of everyday routine, of elegance. Now, imagine taking this symbol of civilian comfort and trying to integrate it into the brutal, one-bound world of the samurai. It's like trying to wear a silk kimono under a suit of armor, conceptually jarring. The samurai, by their very definition, were separate from the common folk. Their lives were dedicated to martial arts, true loyalty, to a strict hierarchy. Their attire, their weapons, even their mannerisms, were designed to set them apart. So, the idea of a samurai casually unfurling a fagasa that might be identical to one carried by a rice farmer or a fishmonger presented a subtle challenge to their elevated status. It was less about the physical act and more about the cultural implications. Would it blur the lines between the warrior class and the commoners? This might seem like an overthinking of a simple umbrella, but in a society as rigidly structured as feudal Japan, these symbolic distinctions mattered immensely. Consider the aesthetics of war at the time. Samurai armor, while functional, was also incredibly artistic. Elaborate helmets, vibrant lacing, and intricate designs weren't just for protection. They were meant to inspire awe and fear, to display wealth and power. An umbrella, however beautiful, doesn't quite fit into that intimidating tableau. It lacks the sharp edges, the glint of steel, the inherent threat of a weapon. It's an object of shelter, not destruction. And for a warrior whose entire purpose was, ultimately, destruction or at least, the readiness for it, this might have felt fundamentally incongruous. This cultural friction is fascinating because it shows how even seemingly simple innovations can bump up against deeply ingrained societal norms. While modern military strategists might scoff at the idea of not using every available tool for an advantage, the samurai lived in a world where how you did something was often as important as what you did. The path of the warrior wasn't just about winning. It was about winning with honor, with dignity, and in a manner befitting one's station. So, while an umbrella might have offered a dry head, it might have cost a samurai a sliver of his intangible, yet invaluable, honor in the eyes of his peers. It's a tension that makes you realize how complex human motivation can be, even in the heat of battle. Let's step away from the grand pronouncements of honor and duty for a moment and consider the samurai not as an idealized warrior, but as a person, just like you and me, albeit one who carries a very sharp sword. What was a typical day like for a samurai, especially during a campaign or while awaiting battle? It wasn't all glorious charges and dramatic duels, you know. Much of it was waiting, long, tedious stretches of waiting. Waiting for orders, waiting for the rain to stop, waiting for supplies, waiting for the enemy to make a move. And during these stretches, life had to go on. They ate, often simple rations of rice, miso, and dried fish, prepared by their attendants or even themselves. They cleaned their armor and weapons, a never-ending task, especially in damp conditions where rust was a constant threat to their prized blades. They mended their clothing, wrote letters home if they were lucky enough to have that luxury, or simply sat around, perhaps playing a game of Go or sharing stories. This is where the mundane practicality of an ichang like a Vagasa truly shines. Imagine setting up a temporary camp. The distant thrum of drums begins, a low, rhythmic pulse that seems to vibrate through the very ground beneath your feet. You grip your katana, its familiar way to comfort, but then, something catches your eye. Off to your left, a grizzled veteran, a warrior known for his stoicism and fierce loyalty, is meticulously unfolding. An umbrella, not a flimsy modern one, mind you, but something with a sturdy bamboo frame and wallpaper canopy. You blink. Is this some new, strange ritual you missed? You're trying to read a scroll, or perhaps sketch a map, or just enjoy a quiet moment of reflection, and it starts to drizzle. Having a Vagasa to unfurl, to create a small, dry personal space, would be an absolute godsend. It's not about fighting, it's about living. Samurai were also quite particular about their hygiene, or at least as particular as one could be in a feudal encampment. Cleanliness was seen as a sign of discipline and respect, so keeping one's head and face dry from constant rain wouldn't just be about comfort. It would be about maintaining a semblance of order and personal dignity in often squalid conditions. A dry face might mean less chance of skin irritation, or simply a clearer mind. These are the small, everyday battles that every soldier, in every era, has had to fight. Many historical accounts tend to focus on the dramatic battles and political intrigues, often neglecting these quieter, more human aspects of a warrior's life. But these are the details that truly bring history to life, allowing us to empathize with people who lived centuries ago. So, while the image of a samurai charging with an umbrella is perhaps a stretch, the idea of a samurai using an umbrella in the countless hours between charges makes perfect sense. It transforms from a bizarre battlefield accessory into a practical tool for survival and comfort in a harsh, demanding environment. It humanizes them, reminding us that beneath the formidable armor and the strict code of Bushido, there were still individuals grappling with basic human needs and seeking small moments of respite from the relentless realities of their world. It's a subtle shift in perspective, but it makes the whole idea of samurais and umbrellas far less absurd and far more relatable. You're starting to get it now, right? The practical side of things. But here's another thought. Why was the Vagasa the solution, and not, say, a dedicated raincoat? This isn't just about having an umbrella. It's about the broader context of pre-industrial technology and material science. In feudal Japan, waterproof fabrics as we know them simply didn't exist. There was no Gore-Tex, no synthetic polymers, no chemically treated nylon. The primary materials available were natural fibers like silk, cotton, and hemp, all of which are highly absorbent. Sure, they had things like straw raincoats, minnow, and woven rush mats, but these were bulky, shed water rather than truly repellent, and made movement cumbersome. Imagine trying to execute a swift sword maneuver or ride a horse wearing what amounts to a large, stiff high bale. It's not graceful, nor is it conducive to agile combat. Leather, while somewhat water-resistant, was heavy, expensive, and not widely used for full-body rain protection in the same way. The technology for seamless, lightweight, flexible waterproofing just wasn't there. So, the genius of the Vagasa lies in its ingenious use of existing natural materials in a way that simulated waterproofing. The oiled paper, the lacquered bamboo, these were the pinnacle of their available waterproof technology. It's a testament to human ingenuity to make the best of what you have. It also highlights a common historical pattern. Solutions to problems often evolve from existing crafts and knowledge, rather than appearing as entirely new inventions out of thin air. The umbrella had been around for centuries, primarily as a sunshade, but its inherent design lent itself to adaptation for rain protection. This technological gap is a crucial piece of the puzzle. If a samurai had access to a lightweight, durable rain cone, would he have chosen an umbrella? Probably not for combat. But since that wasn't an option, the Vagasa became a surprisingly viable, if somewhat unconventional, alternative. It's a reminder that we often view historical practices through our modern lens, assuming solutions that simply weren't available back then. Academic circles often emphasize that material limitations profoundly shape daily life and military practices in historical periods. It's not just about what they chose to do, but what they could do with the tools and knowledge at their disposal. The umbrella, then, wasn't just a quirky choice. It was a clever workaround in a world without waterproof jackets. Or has the stress of impending battle finally gotten to him? You glance around, half expecting someone else to react, but no one seems to bat an eye. This, my friends, is your first glimpse into a subtly peculiar corner of samurai history, where the line between practical tool and bizarre accessory gets a little blurry, and honestly, historians are still debating just how common this was, or if it was more of a rare, tactical choice for very specific circumstances. Now, let's broaden our view a bit and look at how umbrellas, or similar items, were used by the highman, the common people, and what that tells us. The Vagasa wasn't some exclusive samurai accessory. It was a ubiquitous part of everyday life for virtually everyone in Japan. Farmers used them to shield themselves from the harsh sun while toiling in the fields. Merchants carried them to protect their wares and themselves as they traveled between towns, and townspeople used them simply to navigate the streets in sun or rain. It was the original everyday carry item, long before that term existed. Imagine a bustling marketplace, a riot of colors and sounds. You'd see dozens, perhaps hundreds, of Vagasa bobbing through the crowd, each a small, mobile canopy. Some might be plain, wheeled paper, while others were exquisitely painted with landscapes, birds, or calligraphy, reflecting the owner's taste or status. These weren't just utilitarian objects. They were often beautiful pieces of folk art, reflecting the aesthetic sensibilities of the era. They were cheap enough for many to afford, yet valuable enough to be treasured, and unlike the samurai's imposing armor, which was designed to instill fear and command respect, the Vagasa was a symbol of quiet resilience, of making the best of the elements. There are even folk tales and superstitions associated with umbrellas. For example, some old Japanese folklore speaks of Kosabe, a type of yakai, or supernatural monster, that is essentially a sentient, one-legged umbrella with a single eye, often depicted playfully hopping around. This whimsical creature springs from the idea that old objects, if discarded carelessly, could become imbued with a spirit. It shows just how deeply integrated the umbrella was into the daily lives and imaginations of the people. It wasn't just a tool, but something that could transcend into the realm of myth and magic. This ubiquitous presence of the Vagasa in civilian life makes its potential use by samurai even more intriguing. It emphasizes that while the samurai were a distinct class, they weren't entirely disconnected from the mundane realities of the world around them. They lived in the same climate, faced the same practical challenges of rain and sun, and likely interacted with the same common goods. Historians often debate how much common culture permeated rigid class structures, and the humble Vagasa offers a small, intriguing window into that overlap. It underscores that even the most fearsome warriors sometimes just needed to stay dry, blurring the lines between the noble and the mundane in the most charming way possible. Alright, let's get into the nitty-gritty. The stuff that makes historians pull out their hair. Actual evidence. Did samurai really carry umbrellas into battle? Or is this just one of those charming historical anecdotes that gets stretched into something it wasn't? The truth is, concrete, undeniable proof is surprisingly scarce. You won't find battle reports filled with lines like, and then, Lord Nobunaga, beneath his finest wallpaper Vagasa, led the charge. It's just not the kind of detail military chroniclers typically bothered with. They were more interested in troop movements, casualties, and strategic victories. However, the absence of explicit mention isn't necessarily the absence of practice. Think about it. If it was a common, mundane thing, like carrying a water skin or a small patch of rice, it simply wouldn't be noteworthy enough to record. We mostly rely on indirect evidence, and that's where the academic debates truly begin. Some scholars point to period artworks, like certain ukiyo-e woodblock prints or battle screens by a book. Occasionally, you might spot a figure in the background, possibly an attendant or a low-ranking soldier, holding an umbrella. But these are often highly stylized depictions, sometimes romanticized or even allegorical, rather than photographic representations of reality. Can we truly infer widespread battlefield use from a handful of artistic embellishments? Scholars are still very much in disagreement on this. Then there's the question of archaeological finds. Have we ever unearthed an intact, or even partial, vergasa from a battlefield site? Not that you typically hear about. It's less wacky battlefield fashion and more weight. Did that just happen? Kind of weird. Welcome to the show. You're still standing there, a little bewildered by the umbrella-wielding veteran. But then, a sudden gust of wind whips across the field, carrying with it the undeniable scent of rain. 5 drops begin to fall, first sparsely, then with an increasing rhythm, splattering against your lacquered helmet and running in cold rivulets down your neck. Given their delicate construction of paper and bamboo, they wouldn't survive the ravages of time and conflict like metal armor or pottery. This lack of material evidence further fuels the skepticism of some historians, who argue that the idea of a samurai carrying umbrellas into battle is largely a modern romanticization or a misunderstanding of their use around battlefields, perhaps for shelter in camp. It's these gray areas in history that are often the most fascinating. We're piecing together a mosaic from incomplete fragments, trying to understand what life was really like for these warriors beyond the grand narratives. Was it a rare, eccentric choice by a particular individual? Was it a regional practice? Or was it simply something that happened so rarely, or was so inconsequential to the uncommon battle, that it slipped through the cracks of official records? It's a compelling mystery, and it reminds us that history isn't always a neatly packaged set of facts. Sometimes, it's a giant, intriguing question mark, especially when it comes to the smaller, more human details. You've seen some of those old Japanese woodblock prints, right? The ones depicting samurai in dramatic poses, often with cherry blossoms or Mount Fuji in the background. They're undeniably beautiful, romanticized visions of a bygone era. And sometimes, just sometimes, you might see an umbrella in these artworks. But here's the thing, art, especially historical art, isn't always a direct historical document. It's often an interpretation, a stylistic choice, or even a form of propaganda. Take the famous ukiyo-e prints. These were incredibly popular in their day, depicting everything from geishas and kabuki actors to sumo wrestlers and, yes, samurai. But their primary purpose was often entertainment or capturing a fleeting moment of beauty, not necessarily historical accuracy. An artist might include an umbrella because it adds a certain aesthetic charm, a touch of everyday life, or perhaps a visual contrast to the rigid armor. It could be a way to make the scene more relatable to the common person viewing the print, who would regularly use an umbrella. So, seeing an umbrella in a print of a samurai isn't definitive proof they carried them into the thick of battle. It might simply mean they carried them to and from battle, or while waiting in camp, or that the artist just thought it looked cool. Scholars continually warn against taking artistic depictions as literal historical facts without corroborating evidence. It's similar to how modern historical dramas take liberties. Adding a dramatic slow-motion shot, or having characters say things that sound cool but might be historically inaccurate. Artists, even back then, were storytellers, and sometimes a good story trumps strict reality. There's a certain allure to the image of a stoic samurai, amidst the chaos, maintaining his composure under a delicate vergasa. It's a powerful visual, blending vulnerability with strength, a quiet defiance against the storm. It's romantic, almost poetic, and that makes for a much better print than just a bunch of wet, miserable guys. So, while these artworks provide valuable glimpses into the culture and daily life, we have to approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to specific battlefield practices. They tell us what people imagined or idealized, or perhaps what happened on rare, specific occasion that became memorable. They don't necessarily tell us what was commonplace. The beauty of these artistic portrayals lies in their ability to evoke a feeling, to transport you to a different time, even if the details are a little fluid. It's a testament to the power of human imagination, then and now, to fill in the gaps of history with something a little more dramatic or visually striking. As you ponder the blurred lines between artistic license and historical reality, let's briefly touch upon the very tools that defined the samurai, their weapons. The katana, the boyumi, the spear yari, these were constantly evolving. Blacksmiths toiled for weeks, sometimes months, to forge a single blade, meticulously folding steel to achieve unparalleled sharpness and flexibility. Archers trained for years to master the art of the kaido, firing arrows with incredible precision over long distances. These were instruments of war, constantly refined for efficiency and lethality. Compare that obsessive refinement with the humble Vagasa. You pull your chin deeper into your gorget, trying to shield yourself. This, you quickly realize, is the inconvenient reality of warfare in Japan. It rains a lot. Japan, an archipelago nation, is blessed or cursed, depending on your perspective, with a climate that's often wet and humid. Monsoons, typhoon, general rainy seasons. They all conspire to make the battlefield a soggy, miserable place. Now, think about your magnificent, intricately crafted samurai armor. While beautifully crafted, it wasn't engineered for combat. It couldn't parry a blow, nor could it launch an attack. Its evolution was primarily about improving its waterproofing and aesthetic qualities, not its battlefield effectiveness. This contrast highlights a fundamental difference in purpose. The samurai's primary tools were about projection of force, about offense and defense in a brutal, physical sense. The Vagasa, if used at all, was a tool of comfort, of personal mitigation against the elements. It's an interesting juxtaposition, the deadly precision of the katana against the passive protection of the umbrella. This isn't to say that samurai didn't use other non-weapon items in surprising ways. For instance, the war fan gunsen or taisen was a common accessory. While it could be used for fanning oneself on a hot day, it was also a surprisingly effective, albeit rudimentary, defensive tool. Made of sturdy metal or reinforced wood, it could deflect blows, signal commands, or even be used for a quick, shocking jab in close quarters. It blurred the lines between utility and weapon, reflecting a warrior's constant readiness. But even the war fan, with its hidden potential for defense, is a far cry from the delicate Vagasa. This distinct difference in utility reinforces the idea that if umbrellas were used on the battlefield, it was for highly specific, non-combat roles, mainly personal protection from the weather. Archaeological findings related to samurai weaponry are abundant, showing the incredible advancements in forging and design. Yet, a dedicated battle umbrella simply isn't a recognized category in military history. It's a compelling reminder that while necessity may be the mother of invention, some inventions simply aren't suited for every occasion, no matter how clever the workaround. After the tumultuous era of warring states, Japan entered a period of profound peace under the Tokugawa shogunate, known as the Edo period. This was a time of relative stability, flourishing arts, and a booming merchant class. And what happened to our humble Vagasa during this transformation? It truly came into its own, moving firmly from any imagined battlefield role to become an indispensable item of daily life, and even a fashion statement. With peace came prosperity, and with prosperity came an increased focus on comfort, leisure, and aesthetic refinement. The Vagasa became more elaborate, more decorative. Artisans experimented with new dyes, intricate patterns, and finer papers. They weren't just functional, they were beautiful accessories. You'd see ladies of the court carrying exquisitely painted silk umbrellas, while wealthy merchants might commission Vagasa adorned with their family crests. It became a subtle way to display wealth, taste, and social standing, even in a society that still maintained strict class divisions. The demand for Vagasa also led to the growth of specialized umbrella-making towns and districts, where entire communities thrived on the craftsmanship. This period saw the Vagasa reach its peak in terms of artistry and widespread use. It was a common sight in bustling Edo, modern-day Tokyo, in Kyoto's elegant gardens, and along the scenic Tokaido Road that connected the major cities. It was used for everything from protecting against the sun during a leisurely stroll to shielding oneself from the pervasive drizzle of a spring day. It symbolized the new, more refined and tranquil way of life that had settled over Japan. The samurai, true, adapted to this new era. While their martial skills were still revered, they increasingly took on administrative roles, becoming bureaucrats and scholars. They still carried their swords, but less for battle and more as a symbol of their status. And they, too, would have used fugasa in their daily lives, perhaps in a more subdued style befitting their rank, but undeniably as a practical and elegant accessory. This transition from a potential, albeit unlikely, battlefield item to a widespread civilian essential is a fascinating microcosm of Japan's journey from an age of constant warfare to a long period of internal peace. It shows how even the simplest object can reflect profound societal shifts. Historians generally agree that the Edo period marked a golden age for many traditional Japanese crafts, and the fugasa is a perfect example of this artistic and utilitarian flourishing. It's designed to deflect blows, to intimidate, to look utterly badass. But it's not exactly built for waterproofing. The silk lacing that holds the scales together quickly absorbs water, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. Your choppy socks are soaked through, turning your boots into squelching, cold prisons for your feet. Your sword, that prized possession, needs constant wiping down to prevent rust, a tiny detail you probably hadn't considered while dreaming of heroic charges. And so, we bring a sleepy journey back to the present, leaving the mud and rain of feudal Japanese battlefields behind. You can almost feel the gentle hum of your fan, the dim lights of your room, replacing the distant thrum of war drums. The story of the samurai and the umbrella, whether a common reality or a fascinating historical quirk, serves as a gentle reminder that history isn't just about grand heroes and epic clashes. It's also about the small, human details, the mundane challenges, and the surprising ingenuity that shapes daily life, even in the most extraordinary circumstances. Perhaps the next time you find yourself caught in a sudden downpour, holding your modern, lightweight umbrella, you'll spare a passing thought for those ancient warriors. Were they fumbling with oiled paper and bamboo, trying to keep the rain out of their eyes while simultaneously preparing for a life-or-death encounter? Or did they simply stand stoically, accepting the discomfort as part of their path, while the umbrella remained a civilian comfort? The truth, historians confess, remains elusive, hidden in the whispers of time and the sparse, often ambiguous records, and maybe that's part of its charm. It's in these little unanswered questions, these slightly absurd possibilities, that history truly comes alive, becoming less like a textbook and more like a gentle, meandering stream, occasionally revealing a glint of something unexpected beneath its surface. It's about recognizing that people, across all eras and cultures, are always trying to find a way to make life a little less inconvenient, a little more comfortable, even when facing the most monumental challenges. And now, as the last echoes of our story fade, I hope your mind feels a little lighter, your thoughts a little softer. The worries of the day can drift away like clouds on a gentle breeze. Let the stillness of the night wrap around you, a blanket of quiet comfort. You've journeyed through time, glimpsed a peculiar moment, and now it's time for your own quiet rest. Feel the weight of your eyelids, the slow, steady rhythm of your breath. The ancient world, with all its strange and wonderful details, is now part of your dreaming landscape. Let your thoughts unfold, just like an old fugasa opening slowly, revealing only peace and calm. The distant sound of crickets, or perhaps just the hum of your fan, can lull you deeper. You are safe, you are warm, and the stories of the past have done their quiet work. Sink into the softness beneath you, release any lingering tension, the world will wait. For now, there is only this moment, this quiet drift towards deep, restorative sleep. These practices were often deeply intertwined with local resources, traditional knowledge, and whatever ingredients were readily available in their environment. What all these diverse methods share is a common goal, to maintain oral health in a world without modern dentistry. Whether it was the Egyptians' abrasive powders, the Babylonians' chewing sticks, or the Romans' ammonia-rich mouthwash, these were innovative, if sometimes uncomfortable, solutions to a universal problem. and historians are still debating the precise cross-cultural influences and independent innovations in ancient oral hygiene practices. Did some ideas spread along trade routes? Or did similar problems simply lead different cultures to similar and similarly strange solutions? It's a fascinating puzzle that highlights the shared human desire for health and cleanliness, even when approaches diverge wildly. So, as you reflect on your Roman dental experience, take a moment to appreciate that across the ancient world, people were creatively tackling the challenge of keeping their teeth and gums healthy. It makes your Roman mouthwash seem a little less isolated in its oddity, part of a larger tapestry of human ingenuity and sometimes dental disaster across the ages. And it certainly makes you thankful for your modern toothbrush and minty fresh toothpaste, doesn't it?